I used to believe betrayal came from lovers, backstabbing friends, or shady co-workers. But I was wrong. The deepest betrayal I ever experienced came from the people I trusted most, my own parents. That kind of betrayal doesn't arrive with warning signs. It creeps in quietly, disguised as love and concern, only revealing its true nature when it's already too late. It was an ordinary Sunday night in Austin, Texas. My apartment was quiet. The only sounds were the soft hum of the refrigerator and the occasional whistle of wind brushing against the window pane. I was sipping coffee, mentally preparing for the week ahead, when I opened my laptop to check my bank account. It had become a weekly ritual, something I'd done for more than a decade. Check the balance, watch it grow, feel the quiet satisfaction that years of hard work were finally building into something real. But this time, what I saw made my stomach drop. My account didn't show the $264,000 I had saved. Instead, it showed a balance of just $143.26. I stared at the screen, refreshed the page, checked the account details again. I thought it had to be a glitch. It had to be. Then I opened the transaction history. One transfer, last Tuesday, $264,000, gone. I froze. I couldn't process what I was seeing. That money had taken 12 years to save. Every late-night freelance gig, every packed lunch at work, every vacation I skipped, every worn-out pair of shoes I kept wearing one more season, it was all there, in that number. And now it was gone, vanished, reduced to a single transaction line on a screen. I didn't call the bank. I didn't file a dispute. I called my dad. He answered like nothing had happened. "Hey, Ethan, everything all right?" "No," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "My savings account, it's empty, over $260,000, gone." There was a pause. Then he laughed, lightly, casually, as if I'd just told a silly joke. "Oh, that. Yeah, we took care of that. Your brother needed the final investment to launch his company. You should be proud. You helped." I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I laughed too, but not like he did. My laugh was sharp, bitter, involuntary. It felt like I was trapped in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. I hung up without another word. There was nothing left to say. He had made it clear. This wasn't just theft. This was a decision. They had decided the money wasn't mine to begin with. 12 years. I started working when I was 17. Stocking shelves, fixing laptops, tutoring. I paid for college with scholarships and part-time jobs. Then came a stable career in software engineering. Through it all, I had one goal: to buy a house outright, or nearly so. A quiet, simple place. Something that was mine. A space where I could finally breathe, free from the pressure of anyone else's expectations. Every dollar in that account represented more than money. It was proof that I didn't owe anyone anything, that I could build a future without shortcuts, without help, that I could escape. And now it was gone. Not by accident, not by a scammer or some hacker, but by the people who raised me. That night, something else clicked. For weeks, my laptop had been acting strangely, programs freezing, websites loading slowly. I'd assumed it was just outdated software or hardware issues. But now I was suspicious. I opened Task Manager and started combing through the running processes. One stood out, a name I didn't recognize. I looked it up on my phone. It was remote access software, spyware, the kind that logs keystrokes, record screens, and tracks activity. My hands went cold. Only one person besides me had ever used this computer, my dad. A few years ago, when I had trouble setting up my banking portal as a freshman, I gave him remote access to help me troubleshoot. I never changed the password afterward, and that one moment of trust had been all he needed. They had been watching me, tracking, planning. They hadn't just stolen my savings. They had violated my privacy, exploited my trust, used me. That night, I stopped being the quiet, obedient son. That was the moment I realized this wasn't about money. It was about control, power, ownership. And if they thought I was going to disappear quietly, they were about to learn something new about the man they raised. The next morning, I woke up early, even though I hadn't slept more than an hour. My thoughts were a maze of betrayal, questions, and rage. I kept replaying the conversation with my father in my head, his voice so calm, so certain, like what they did was normal, like it was expected. But the moment that haunted me more than the money was the possibility that they had been spying on me, not figuratively, literally. If that process I saw on my laptop really was spyware, it meant they had been inside my digital life for who knows how long. Emails, passwords, banking, private files, personal messages, all of it. That kind of violation isn't just creepy, it's psychological warfare, and it started making sense. Little things I'd brushed off suddenly came into focus. The occasional odd question from my mom during our Sunday calls like, "Did you decide on that house in Round Rock yet?" Or, "I noticed you haven't transferred any funds in a while. Everything okay?" I used to think she was just being nosy. Now I realized she already knew the answers. She had seen everything I did online, possibly in real time. I booted up the laptop again. This time I wasn't just annoyed, I was focused. I wanted proof. I ran a full diagnostic using tools I found through a cybersecurity forum. What I discovered confirmed my worst fears. The software had been installed using admin-level access. It had quietly collected data in the background for months. Keystrokes, screenshots, clipboard content, even remote webcam activity. I sat back in my chair, disgusted. They hadn't just watched my money, they had watched me. It was like someone had followed me home every night, peeked through my windows and cataloged my thoughts. I felt naked, violated. It wasn't just theft, it was surveillance, and I couldn't even guess how far they'd gone or what they'd done with the data they collected. I grabbed an external drive and backed up everything. Logs, files, hidden folders, the digital footprint of their intrusion. I knew I was going to need this, not just to understand what they'd done, but to prove it. Then I shut the laptop down and slid it into a drawer. I couldn't use it anymore, not safely. I didn't even want to be in the same room as it. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed staring at the wall, 1,000 emotions boiling inside me. Sadness, rage, embarrassment, shame. But underneath all of it was a new, sharper feeling, resolve. They had broken something in me, but they also revealed exactly who they were. Not concerned parents, not misguided family, predators. And predators don't stop until you make them. So I made a plan. The first step was finding someone who could help me untangle this, someone who understood digital security better than I did. I didn't have a long list of hacker friends or tech gurus, but I knew one person who might be able to help, Riley. We hadn't spoken in over a year. Things between us had ended awkwardly, but not badly. She worked in cybersecurity for a private firm and always had a talent for sniffing out digital lies. I hesitated before texting her, unsure how to explain everything. But when I finally typed out a message, "Hey, I need help. I think someone installed spyware on my computer and stole a lot of money," her reply came within minutes. "Come over, bring the laptop, and coffee." It was the first time I felt the smallest flicker of hope. The next day, I drove across town to her place. Her apartment looked the same, clean, minimalist, full of plants and the smell of roasted beans. She didn't say much when she opened the door, just looked at my face and nodded silently. I handed her the laptop. She placed it on her desk like it was evidence in a federal case and immediately got to work. As she scrolled through system files and deep-level processes, her expression darkened. "Whoever did this wasn't sloppy," she said. "This wasn't malware you downloaded by accident. This was manually installed by someone with full access, and it's been running for at least 6 months, maybe longer." I nodded. "I think it was my dad." She paused, looking up at me. "Jesus, Ethan. I think they used it to get into my savings account. They cleaned it out." Her voice dropped. "Do you know where it went?" "I know it was one transfer. I have the record. I don't know where it landed." Riley's fingers moved faster. "We'll find out." And I believed her. What they'd done wasn't just personal. It was criminal. The more we dug, the more I understood. This wasn't a one-time betrayal. This was systemic, calculated, cold. My parents had watched me build something for 12 years, only to rip it away the moment it became useful to them. They thought I wouldn't fight back. They were wrong. I always knew my parents cared about appearances. Our house growing up was spotless, every picture frame perfectly aligned, every throw pillow fluffed like a showroom display. It wasn't about comfort, it was about control, presentation, how we looked to neighbors, to relatives, to the world outside. What I didn't realize until now was that the clean lines and fake smiles were more than obsessive habits. They were camouflage. As Riley continued combing through my laptop and digital records, I couldn't help but think back to my childhood home. The place had always made me feel uneasy in a way I couldn't name until recently. It wasn't warm, even though it was always tidy. It wasn't safe, even though nothing ever seemed out of place. The tension was buried under politeness, hidden beneath birthday cakes and chore charts. I used to think that was just how families were, structured, a little distant. Now I saw it for what it was: grooming, emotional conditioning. My brother Dylan was the golden child. Everything he did was met with applause. Straight B's? He's just so creative. Crashed the family car? It's part of growing up. He bounced from major to major, dropped out of grad school twice, and landed on entrepreneur as his identity of choice. My parents funded every failed idea without hesitation. Me? I brought home a full scholarship and got a pat on the head. Quiet, reliable Ethan, the one who never needed help, the one they could ignore. And now I realized they didn't ignore me. They just saw me as a resource, a hidden bank account they'd been quietly investing in, not with love, but with access. And when the time came, they cashed out. It wasn't just the spyware or the transfer. Riley helped me dig deeper into the digital trail. The savings account I thought had been emptied wasn't just drained into Dylan's business. It had first been rerouted through 2 other domestic accounts, both with names I didn't recognize, before finally landing in an investment firm Dylan had just registered 3 weeks earlier. "This is structured," Riley muttered as she traced the path on her second monitor. "They didn't just take the money, they tried to make it look clean." "You mean like laundering?" She nodded. "Basic level, but yeah. They're disguising the origin of the funds. If anyone ever asks, they can say the money came from investors or a loan, not from you." The thought made my stomach twist. This wasn't just family betrayal. It was a con. A long, patient con designed to make me feel secure while they laid the groundwork to exploit everything I had built. "They're not new to this," I said out loud. "Nope," Riley replied. "This wasn't a first-time job. This was practiced." And there it was, the worst realization yet. This wasn't just about me. If they had the skills and structure to pull this off with their own son, who else had they done it to? Were there other victims? Former business partners? Elderly relatives? It felt like the edges of the story were starting to burn away, revealing something much uglier underneath. But before we went chasing bigger leads, I needed to understand the personal part, the emotional part. I needed to revisit everything I thought I knew about my family and ask myself how I didn't see this coming. I remembered how my mom always called Dylan our future. She used that phrase at dinner once when I was 14. He was 10. She looked at him and said, "Everything we do is for our future." I thought she meant the family. Now I know she meant him. Every holiday, every phone call, every awkward Sunday brunch had been soaked in favoritism. I used to brush it off. I told myself it didn't matter. I was independent. I didn't need the praise. But it did matter. Because the very same people who downplayed everything I achieved were the ones secretly plotting to use it when it was convenient for them. They manipulated me into being the good son, because good sons don't ask questions. They don't change passwords. They don't say no. That was the lie, the perfect lie, that we were a functional family, that they loved me, that everything was fine, but nothing was fine. Everything was scripted. Every compliment, every apology, every "we're proud of you" was another layer of control. Another way to keep me tame, compliant, quiet. Until now. Riley turned from her screen. "You need to start protecting yourself, not just from what they've done, but what they might still do." I nodded. I'm already there. Because once the mask slips, you can't unsee the monster behind it. And I had spent too long believing in the performance. Now it was time to burn the script. When I was younger, I thought spyware was something that only happened to celebrities or corporate executives. I imagined shadowy hackers in basements, not a smiling father and overly cheerful mother sitting in a perfectly decorated living room. I never thought I'd be the target, especially not from inside my own bloodline. Riley kept digging through the code buried deep in my laptop's system. "They didn't just install any spyware," she said without looking up. "This is custom modified. It's got pieces of off-the-shelf software, but someone with know-how tweaked it. Your dad isn't just a guy who figured out your password. He either built this or paid someone to build it." That hit harder than I expected. My dad had always been the practical one. He worked in IT support for years. Nothing fancy, but he knew enough to talk circles around average people. I used to think it was harmless, just a dad thing to lecture me about firewalls and password complexity, but it turns out that was all part of the act. He wasn't trying to protect me. He was laying the groundwork to monitor me. Riley pulled up logs, actual timestamps of when the software had been accessed. She pointed to one in particular. "Look, this was 3 weeks ago. Someone logged in remotely for over 2 hours. Screen captures, system access, file browsing." "That was the night I was working on my mortgage pre-approval," I said slowly. "I filled out my tax forms, uploaded documents, and wrote down my income details." "And they watched all of it," Riley confirmed. My stomach turned. I felt like I'd been stripped bare without even knowing it. That wasn't just financial spying, it was identity theft in progress. With that much information, they could do anything: open credit cards, take out loans, impersonate me. And judging by what we'd already found, they weren't going to stop at stealing from my savings. "They've been watching you longer than you think," Riley said. "This goes back at least 8 months." 8 months. They had watched me apply for apartments, order groceries, write emails, research homes. They knew when I was struggling, they knew when I was planning something, and they waited until the exact moment it would hurt the most to strike. I stood up, pacing the room. "I don't think this was about the money." Riley gave me a look. "Of course it was about the money." "No," I said. "I mean, yes, they wanted it. But it's more than that. They wanted control. They wanted to remind me I'll never be the one in charge. That no matter how much I save, how hard I work, I'll always be their backup plan." She paused. "That's abuse, Ethan." It was. I just hadn't called it that before. Growing up, I thought abuse meant yelling or bruises, not fake smiles and secret surveillance, not guilt trips masked as family values. But now I saw it clearly. They didn't love me, not in a way that respected me. They loved what I could provide, and they feared what would happen if I ever stopped being useful. We made a plan. Riley advised me to cut off all remote access points. I used a clean machine to change every password I had: banking, email, cloud storage. We filed a fraud alert with the credit bureaus and froze my credit. I opened new bank accounts at a separate institution and moved everything there. I even scheduled an appointment to speak with a lawyer. By the time I left Riley's apartment that night, I had something I hadn't felt in days: control. But that wasn't enough. This wasn't just about getting my life back on track. It was about stopping them. They thought I was passive, safe, predictable. They thought they could violate me without consequence. They were wrong. Back home, I sat in the silence of my apartment, thinking back to every conversation I'd had with them over the past year. The little digs, the questions that didn't make sense at the time, the pressure to help Dylan, the suggestion that I didn't really need a house yet. It had all been part of the setup. They didn't just plant spyware on my computer. They had planted manipulation in my mind for years, conditioned me to question myself, to prioritize their needs, to play the loyal son while they took and took and took. But now, the loyalty was gone. The fog had cleared, and all that remained was truth. I wasn't going to warn them. I wasn't going to confront them, yet. I was going to keep collecting data, quietly, legally, thoroughly. Because if they wanted to use my name to build their empire of lies, I was going to use the truth to tear it down. The day I drove to my parents' house, everything felt different. The streets I'd grown up on no longer felt familiar, just fake. Every manicured lawn, every American flag hanging off a porch, every smile from a neighbor who waved out of habit now felt like part of a carefully constructed lie. I pulled into their driveway slowly, like I was entering a crime scene, which, in some twisted way, I was. Their house was still perfect, not a weed in the yard, not a smudge on the windows. The porch chairs were angled with military precision, and Mom's wreath on the front door had been changed out for the season, like always. Fall leaves this time, burnt orange, gold. So festive it made me want to scream. I rang the doorbell. Dylan answered. Of course he was here. He smiled lazily when he saw me, still holding his phone in one hand. Hey man, Mom and Dad are in the living room. Come on in. I stepped inside, heart pounding, fists tight in my pockets. I didn't return the greeting. My mother was perched on the edge of the couch, flipping through a Pottery Barn catalog. My father was reclined in his chair with a mug of coffee. They looked up in unison. Ethan, Mom said, bright and cheery like it was Thanksgiving morning. What a surprise. No, I said. It's not. Dad's face stiffened just for a second. Then it reset. Calm, casual, controlled. I think you know why I'm here, I said. Dad set his mug down. You'll have to be more specific. My savings, all of it, gone, and I know it was you. There was a beat of silence. Then my mom let out a laugh, high-pitched and brittle. Oh, honey, you must have made a mistake. Have you checked with the bank? There are so many scams going around lately. Don't insult me, I cut in. I have everything. I know about the spyware on my laptop. I know about the shell accounts. I know you rerouted the money through 2 fake names before dumping it into Dylan's business account. I know you've been monitoring me for months. I have logs. I have timestamps. I have IP addresses that match this house. My father's jaw flexed. His voice, when it came, was low and clipped. Lower your voice. You're upsetting your mother. She's not upset, I said, looking at her. She's calculating. Her eyes narrowed. Watch your tone. No, I said, stepping forward. You watch yours. You broke into my life. You invaded my privacy. You stole from me. And you lied about it. We're your parents, she snapped. You don't talk to us like that. You're not my parents, I said flatly. You're criminals. The silence that followed was thick and electric. Even Dylan had stopped scrolling. His eyes darted between us like he was watching a tennis match in slow motion. Dad stood, towering like he used to when he wanted to intimidate me as a kid, but that weight didn't hold anymore. You're being dramatic, he said. We helped you all your life. We clothed you, fed you, paid for your early tuition. You owe this family. I owe you nothing, I said. That money was mine. I earned every cent. You had no right to it. My father's lips twisted into a smirk. We were just protecting the family's future. Dylan has a real shot at building something. You? You're just sitting on money you wouldn't use. He stole your identity, Dylan mumbled under his breath, like he was trying to say something clever, but his voice cracked halfway through. I turned to him. Did you know the money came from me? He hesitated. I thought it was a gift, or an investment from Mom and Dad. It was my savings, I said. You used stolen money, and if you think that makes you innocent, think again. He looked away. I took a breath. You didn't just take money. You accessed my personal documents, tax returns, IDs, loan applications. You forged my identity. You signed things under my name. I found scanned copies of my social security number and driver's license being used to open accounts I never authorized. Mom stiffened. That's not just financial abuse, I said, voice steady now. That's identity theft. Stolen identity, I repeated, slower, for emphasis. You didn't just steal from me, you tried to become me. You don't understand the pressure we're under, Mom said suddenly, her voice shaking, not from fear but frustration. This family has expectations, appearances to maintain. Dylan's company was a way out, a way to show people we built something. You built nothing, I said. You leeched off me. Dad stepped forward again. What do you want? You're not going to the cops. You wouldn't do that to your own parents. Wouldn't I? I said. I pulled a small flash drive from my pocket and placed it on the coffee table. This has everything. Screen recordings, network logs, banking transfers, even your recorded remote sessions on my laptop. Why bring it here then? He asked, narrowing his eyes. To give you one chance to tell the truth, because the minute I walk out of this house, this goes to my attorney, and then to the FBI. You think they'll hesitate to act on a case this well documented? Multiple fraudulent transfers, identity theft, unauthorized surveillance, tax fraud? Mom looked pale now. Dylan was visibly sweating. I don't want reconciliation, I said, looking them both in the eye. I want accountability. Dad scoffed. You're not strong enough for this kind of fight. I stared at him, deadpan. You're about to find out exactly how strong I am. Then I turned around and walked out of that perfect, pristine house, the one I had once called home. I didn't look back, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like their son. I felt like something more dangerous, someone with nothing left to lose and everything to expose. I couldn't sleep that night. Even though I'd confronted them, even though I'd walked out of their house with fire in my chest, the victory felt hollow, because this wasn't just about stolen money anymore, it was about something far worse. My name, my digital life, my identity. I sat in my apartment with the lights off, staring at the monitor. Riley had sent over a secure file containing every traceable login, every suspicious document created using my credentials, every system log showing remote access. She wasn't just helping me anymore, she was investigating. Around 2 a.m. she called. You need to see this, she said. I clicked the encrypted folder she sent. Inside were dozens of PDFs, scanned documents, signed forms, and database logs, some with my signature, some with forged ones that looked close enough. Loan applications, credit inquiries, bank account registrations, even medical insurance forms, all tied to my social security number, all opened in the past year, none of which I authorized. My parents hadn't just stolen my savings, they had stolen my legal existence. They had turned me into a shell, an identity they could wear like a costume when it suited them, and they hadn't stopped with the money. According to Riley's analysis, they had used my credentials to set up additional accounts under shell business names. Some of them had received payments from third parties, possibly through scams. One was flagged by an anti-fraud system at a mid-sized bank in New Mexico. Another showed a deposit from a fake online charity that was under review by federal authorities. That's when the full weight of what was happening hit me. If I didn't act fast, I wasn't just at risk of financial loss. I could go to prison. It didn't matter that I didn't know what they were doing. If someone traced that money to my name, to my identity, I would be the one standing in front of a courtroom trying to explain why I had a dozen bank accounts, fraudulent tax filings, and a fake LLC running wire transfers across state lines. The fear hit different now. It wasn't emotional. It was survival. I called Riley. Do we have enough to prove they did this? We have more than enough, she said. Between the spyware logs, the IP tracking, and the document metadata, it's not even subtle. Most of the forms were submitted from their IP address. They were sloppy. Do you think they were planning to pin this on me? There was a long pause. I think that was always the plan, she said. That sentence hollowed me out. Because deep down, I knew it was true. They didn't just want access to my money, they wanted a scapegoat. A safety net, someone to carry the blame if the scheme fell apart. They picked me because I was quiet, dependable, trustworthy, because I wouldn't fight back. But they had miscalculated. That night, I started preparing my legal case. Riley helped me organize all the digital evidence into a timeline, from the installation of the spyware, to the first unauthorized account, to the staged bank transfers. She taught me how to create verifiable chains of custody, how to annotate logs, how to timestamp screenshots and extract system-level metadata to prove origin points. It was tedious, exhausting, and emotionally brutal, but it felt good to reclaim control piece by piece. I also contacted a lawyer, an old friend of Riley's who specialized in white-collar crime and cyber fraud. I told her everything. She didn't blink once. By the end of our second meeting, she was already prepping federal documents. "This is organized crime," she said, "and based on what you've shown me, there could be other victims." Other victims. That phrase stuck with me like a thorn. I started asking deeper questions. Was I the only person they'd used this spyware on? Had they done the same thing to elderly relatives, friends from their community group, people who wouldn't question the paperwork or wouldn't even notice until it was too late? Riley dug into the shell companies tied to the money movement. 2 had listed addresses that matched elderly people in their neighborhood, one of whom had passed away 2 years ago. The signature on the business filing matched my dad's handwriting, altered just enough to pass at first glance. It was more than theft. It was deception on a massive scale, a financial fraud operation hidden inside a picture-perfect suburban family. The realization turned my stomach. My parents weren't just emotionally manipulative, they were predators. And I had helped them. I had given them access, trusted them, defended them for years. Now I was untangling a web I didn't even know I was part of. But shame wasn't going to fix anything. I had to keep moving. In the days that followed, I submitted official reports to the Federal Trade Commission and the IRS Identity Theft Unit. My lawyer prepared statements for law enforcement. Riley helped me notify the credit bureaus and freeze every credit file tied to my name. We closed and flagged every fraudulent account. Every piece of fake data they had created in my name would be traced, documented, and used as evidence. I felt like I was building a wall between them and me, brick by digital brick, and for the first time in months, I could finally breathe without feeling like I was being watched. But the damage had been done. I still didn't know how far their network went. I didn't know if Dylan was just a pawn or if he was actively helping them launder money. I didn't know how many other people they had scammed or how many lives they'd wrecked behind closed doors, but I knew one thing with absolute certainty. They picked the wrong son to frame. They thought I'd stay quiet, like always, that I'd swallow the damage, bury the truth, and protect the family name. But I wasn't that person anymore. They didn't just steal my money, they stole my name, and now I was going to take everything back and burn their lies to the ground while I did it. By the time the weekend hit, I wasn't just cleaning up a mess. I was preparing for war. They had stolen my identity, hijacked my financial future, and turned me into a potential fall guy in a criminal operation. But now I had something they didn't count on: help. Riley wasn't just a friend or an ex with a good heart. She was a digital fortress in sneakers and a hoodie, the kind of person who knew how to take down networks, trace hidden files, and fight fire with fire. And she was pissed. "They thought this would end with you cornered," she said as she launched another scanning sequence on her laptop. "But we're going to build you a firewall they can't penetrate, and then we're going to tear theirs down." Her apartment had become our war room. Monitors glowed from every angle, data logs streamed in real time, and sticky notes covered the walls with names, dates, and IP addresses. If someone walked in, they might think we were planning a heist. In truth, we were exposing one. We started by hardening my digital footprint. New bank accounts were opened under tightly encrypted aliases, backed by a digital vault Riley set up with 2-factor authentication and biometric locks. I replaced every password I had ever used. We combed through every device I owned, rooting out potential spyware, dormant trackers, and anything that might tie back to them. Then came Phase 2, tracking them back. Riley had a contact, an ethical hacker she trusted. He went by the alias Bishop and didn't ask for a name or a backstory. All he needed were the raw files. Within hours, he'd mapped a portion of the data flow leaving my parents' house, routing through a private VPN service registered overseas, and pinging servers that linked to a network of dummy corporations across 3 states. "Classic fraud shield," Bishop texted. "You're not just dealing with amateurs. This is layered, but not bulletproof." We now had evidence that the stolen funds weren't just resting in Dylan's business account. They had been laundered, moved quickly through fake nonprofits, converted into crypto, even tied to small business grants that appeared legitimate on the surface. This wasn't an impulsive family money grab. This was an operation. My parents weren't just manipulative, they were criminals with a full-blown infrastructure. It was almost poetic. All those years of being told to trust the family, of being guilt-tripped into keeping quiet, of playing the good son so I wouldn't embarrass them in front of the neighbors. That whole time, they were building a network designed to strip people of their futures and hide behind legacy and respectability. But now we had something they couldn't fabricate: evidence. Riley compiled everything into a digital dossier. Every stolen login, every suspicious document, every IP address linked to their home, every fake business account that had received funds traced back to my social security number. We structured it like a case file, with timestamps, links, references, and supporting screenshots. When my attorney saw the draft, her response was short but firm. "This is airtight." We weren't just going to report them, we were going to destroy their entire setup. But first, we needed to understand the full scope of the damage, and that meant checking how deep they'd reached. I logged into the IRS Identity Protection Portal and found 4 tax returns submitted in my name that I'd never filed. One claimed I'd earned income from a real estate firm I'd never worked for. Another listed a fake dependent. They were sloppy, probably part of a refund scheme, but they were enough to put me at risk for an audit or worse. The same thing happened when I checked into business filings. My name was listed as a registered agent for 2 LLCs I had never even heard of. One of them had recently received a Paycheck Protection Program loan. The other was on a watch list for suspected charity fraud. Riley leaned back in her chair, shaking her head. They really went all in. This is career-level fraud. They weren't just using your name, they were building a fake life out of it. And that was the part that rattled me the most. They hadn't just stolen my savings or used me as a shield. They'd created an alternate version of me, one they could exploit while the real me sat quietly in a 1-bedroom apartment, thinking I was playing life the right way. "They were counting on your silence," Riley said, "on your loyalty, but the second you started asking questions, the whole thing cracked." I nodded slowly. Now I want it to collapse. The next step was legal. My lawyer prepped me for interviews with the FTC and FBI. She told me to be honest, concise, and detailed, but most of all, not to hold back. "They're not your family in the eyes of the law," she said. "They're criminals. Speak like a victim, not like a son." It wasn't easy to switch that mindset. For years I had reflexively protected them, excused them, defended their behavior as overbearing, maybe unfair, but never malicious. But that illusion was gone now. What remained was a digital wreckage they thought they could hide behind, and a son they thought would never push back. But I wasn't that version of Ethan anymore. With Riley and Bishop by my side, with a lawyer who believed me, and with cold, traceable data in my hands, I didn't feel powerless. I felt dangerous. They had built a digital empire on the stolen lives of others, but now we were dismantling it, one access point at a time, and I was just getting started. Revenge isn't loud. It's not a scream or a punch or some dramatic courtroom scene like you see in movies. No, the most satisfying revenge is quiet. It's careful. It's patient. And when it hits so precisely that the target doesn't even know they've been set up until it's too late. That's what I wanted. Not a family fight. Not a blowout. I wanted precision. I wanted justice. I wanted sweet revenge. The best part? They had already walked themselves straight into the trap. Riley and I had been preparing for weeks. Every file, every transaction, every forged signature, documented, backed up, and ready to hand over to the authorities. But we were missing one thing, a final, undeniable connection, something to lock the door behind them when the hammer fell. That's when we had the idea. See, while I had been taking back control of my digital life, I hadn't touched the old savings account they had cleaned out. It was still open, still active, and more importantly, still accessible from their end, because I wanted it that way. That account had become bait, a digital decoy sitting there, like an empty vault with cameras aimed right at it. We called it the mirror. I started funneling a small amount of money into the account, just enough to make it look like I was rebuilding. Modest deposits from side gigs, a couple of reimbursements from a fake freelance company Riley set up under my name. The point wasn't to stock it up. The point was to make it look real. Then came the move that changed everything. Through a fake alias, Riley created a shell company that looked almost identical to the ones they'd been using to launder money. Same format, same naming style, same state registration process. We called it Marble Nest Ventures. The name meant nothing, but it sounded legit. Then we created a realistic-looking invoice that looked like one of their fake payouts. This time it was for digital marketing consulting. The invoice amount? $85,000. We routed the invoice through the bait account with all the digital fingerprints pointing back to their network. IP addresses, document metadata, user agent strings, it all looked like it came from them. We didn't fake anything. They were the ones who had given us the infrastructure. We just mirrored it back at them and made sure the path looked like one of their standard transactions. It worked. 2 days later, we saw activity on the bait account. A familiar IP address, my dad's home office, accessed the account, opened the invoice, and spent 36 minutes logged in. A day after that, a transfer was initiated, $85,000 from one of their active shell accounts into the bait account. They thought they were using me again, but this time they didn't steal anything. They gave me everything I needed. That transaction alone was enough to implicate them. It created a clean paper trail, a fabricated business, a forged payment, an internal movement of stolen funds, all voluntarily pushed into an account under my control. The brilliance wasn't just in what they sent, but in how they sent it. They didn't know the entire transaction was being recorded, time-stamped, and geo-tracked. We had already set up forensic logging software that captured every step of the login, every click, every IP hop. They had unknowingly provided a signed confession. That was our green light. My attorney sent a secure package to the FBI's Financial Crimes Division, along with our full case file. Not long after, we were called in for an in-person debrief. The agent we met with had the quiet, hardened calm of someone who'd seen 100 fraud cases, but even she raised an eyebrow at the depth of the evidence. "You did half our work for us," she said. "They won't see this coming." That's exactly what I wanted. In the meantime, I kept playing the role. I didn't change my tone during our next Sunday call. I let my mom ramble about Dylan's startup needing just one more little push, and let my dad pretend nothing was wrong. I gave them the same blank, calm Ethan they thought they still controlled, but inside, I was already gone. I had detached from them the way you detach from a dying thing you can't save, not out of hate, but survival. And then the storm hit. It was a Tuesday morning when it happened. FBI agents arrived at the commercial office building they listed as their business address, a modest space in a quiet business park, rented to maintain their illusion of professionalism. The agents served warrants, seized hard drives, froze bank accounts, and walked out with boxes of documents and devices. I wasn't there, but I didn't need to be. The silence from my parents that followed told me everything. No call, no text, just void. 3 days later, a local news outlet ran a story about a suburban couple under federal investigation for financial fraud, identity theft, and money laundering. They didn't use my name, but I saw the house in the background of the footage, the perfectly trimmed lawn, the wreath on the door. Their whole image crumbled in 30 seconds of shaky handheld video. Dylan tried to do damage control online, posting vague statements about family betrayal and fabricated stories from a bitter sibling. But the comments under his post told the real story, people from their community sharing their own shady experiences, questioning loans that never got paid back, consulting fees that didn't make sense. The myth of the perfect family was dying, fast. And I didn't feel guilt. I felt relief. This wasn't revenge for the sake of pain. It wasn't petty. It was precision justice, surgical, clean, and devastating. They had spent years crafting a lie they thought was unbreakable, but in the end, they cracked it themselves, through their own arrogance, their greed, and their belief that I would always stay quiet. They weren't just caught, they were exposed. The silence didn't last long. Within a week of the raid, the illusion of my family began collapsing like a paper mansion soaked in gasoline. What the world had once seen as a polished suburban couple, active in the church, involved in the homeowners association, always smiling in their holiday newsletter, was now unraveling under federal investigation. Local news picked it up first, then regional outlets. Eventually, national coverage followed. The charges were serious: financial fraud, identity theft, wire fraud, tax evasion, conspiracy, and more. The FBI wasn't messing around, and they had our file, our digital treasure chest of evidence, to guide their every move. I watched the press conference from my apartment. The agents didn't say my name, but I recognized every reference. Use of surveillance software without consent. Money movement through fabricated LLCs. Fraudulent filings using stolen personal data. It was like hearing someone read out the trauma I had carried in silence for years, now weaponized for justice. Dylan went radio silent. His website for the startup vanished. Social media accounts were wiped. People started whispering in forums, posting screenshots of past dealings, failed collaborations, unpaid debts. It turned out my brother wasn't a tech prodigy. He was a puppet with strings tangled in greed and denial. Meanwhile, old family friends began calling me, some to offer support, others to dig for gossip. My uncle tried to defend them. "They must have been desperate," he said over the phone. "It was probably just poor judgment." "No," I told him flatly. "It was fraud, organized, rehearsed, deliberate." Most people didn't want to believe it, but denial doesn't last long when headlines pile up. Court documents started to become public. My parents' bank records, email exchanges, shell company registrations, surveillance software purchases. It was all there, filed in neat folders of legal reality. The story wrote itself. The worst moment came when I saw the photos, my father being led out of the office in handcuffs, my mother with her makeup smudged and her eyes wide with disbelief. That image stayed in my mind longer than I'd like to admit. I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt something closer to mourning. But not for them. I was mourning what could have been. The truth is, part of me had always hoped they would apologize, that there would be a breaking point where they'd sit across from me and say, "We're sorry, we messed up, we love you." But people like them don't confess. They justify, they redirect, they smear. And that's exactly what they tried to do. They filed counterclaims, accused me of hacking, of blackmail, of lying to law enforcement. But the evidence was ironclad. My lawyer dismantled every accusation before it even reached a hearing. Riley's digital logs, Bishop's network tracing, the bait account transaction, all airtight. Their defense fell apart. The court process dragged on for months, but I stayed involved every step. I gave testimony, provided clarifying statements, submitted documentation. By the end of it, I wasn't just a victim. I was a witness to the full collapse of a fraudulent empire disguised as a family legacy. The sentence came down harder than anyone expected. My father, 12 years in federal prison. My mother, 8 years. Both were found guilty on multiple felony counts, including identity theft, fraud, and computer crime. Their assets were frozen, their accounts seized, and their names officially blackened. They weren't just disgraced, they were done. I bought the house 2 months after the trial ended. Not the one I had originally dreamed about, a cozy 3-bedroom in a clean subdivision, but something better. A fixer-upper on the edge of town. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. I remember holding the keys in my hand, fingers trembling, not with fear, but with disbelief. After everything, after all the damage, all the lies, all the betrayal, I had made it here. I opened the front door, stepped into the echo of empty rooms, and smiled. It smelled like fresh paint and sawdust. It smelled like freedom. I didn't hang pictures right away. I left the walls blank, let the place breathe. I didn't want to carry anything old into this space, not their faces, not their words, not the expectations they'd carved into me like scars. This wasn't a place to remember them. This was a place to remember myself. People talk about closure like it's a moment, a hug, a final conversation, a dramatic apology. But closure, I've learned, is a choice. It's waking up one day and saying, "That's enough." It's letting go, not because they deserve forgiveness, but because you deserve peace. I still get asked about them sometimes. People who knew us growing up, who haven't read the headlines. "How are your parents? How's Dylan's company?" I don't lie. I just say, "We don't talk anymore." And that's the truth. I've stopped waiting for reconciliation. There's no repair where there was never honesty. There's no rebuilding a foundation built on manipulation, silence, and stolen dreams. I used to think I came from a strong family. Now I know I survived a toxic one. But I also built something better. Riley and I stayed in touch. We're not romantic anymore, but she's still my anchor. She reminded me that blood is not a promise. Loyalty is not submission. Family is who shows up when you're not useful, who believes you when the world doesn't, who helps you fight without asking for anything back. I built a new network, friends, colleagues, a community of people who value truth. I told my story, not for pity, but to reclaim my voice, to help others like me who grew up believing love was something you earned by being small and silent. Now I speak loudly. If there's anything I've inherited from that experience, it's this. Never again will I confuse obligation with love, control with protection, or silence with peace. They tried to take my future. But all they did was give me clarity. And if you're reading this, if you've ever felt trapped in a family that only loves what you give, not who you are, let me say this. You can walk away. You can start over. You can build something real. And the only thing sweeter than revenge is freedom. If this story touched you, subscribe to Secret Revenge. Because some revenge needs no knives, no screaming. Just one spotlight, one shining nameplate. And someone they once dismissed, rising, brilliant and unshaken. See you in the next story.